Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
Yes.
Welcome back to the Guadcast. This week we're going to be looking at The Witch. I'm PlaidPagan.
I'm Moon Witch.
And let's get talking.
So...
I think the first time I saw this movie, it just blew me away. I was so... I'm not going to lie, the period piece threw me off a little bit because of the... Thou art, what is thou?
Oh, some of the dialogue is confusing to understand.
It was, it took me a little bit to transition to the language, but upon a second viewing and a third viewing, and now it's become one of my top 5 horror movies of all time. How do you feel about The Witch overall?
I really like The Witch. For me personally too, I love atmospheric horrors.
Same.
And one of the really great things about this one too is I love how the director Robert Eggers really makes us feel like we're in the 17th century colonial New England.
Yes.
And right away he puts you in that mindset.
Yes.
And I like that, yeah.
Yeah, that is one thing that Eggers is incredibly good at, is actually setting very strong period pieces. We also see this in The Lighthouse. But yeah, definitely with The Witch, it's on point. He does a really good job of showing such an extreme time in society with so much religious oppression. I'm just going to preface this episode with a couple of things. One, I'm not going to be shy about religious opinion on this one.
Well, neither was Eggers.
Yeah, if you're super sensitive religiously, you might want to tune out. Secondly, spoilers, of course.
Yeah,
so
always.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about in this film. It's a pretty heavy duty film. There's a
lot going on.
Yeah, I had to narrow it down because I had a shitload to say, and I didn't want this episode to be 4 hours long. So I've narrowed down my thoughts to a couple of key points that I want to talk about, a few important things that I feel. This movie's been talked about a lot. I've seen a lot of videos, a lot of opinions. Some I agree with, some I don't. But this is a film that is many stories within one, depending on how you look at it, where you're coming from with this film, your own background. You will take it as a completely different depending on your personal place in society and like your personal religious upbringing, whichever, this film will affect you on a different level.
And it's really cool that you say that because specifically for the way that perhaps that we were raised, I took this film from the moment I saw it, like finished to end, and every time I repeatedly watch it, it is very much a film about religious hysteria and religious oppression.
Yes, very much religious extremism.
Yeah.
And there's also heavy plots of society versus nature, right?
Yeah.
And I think that in a lot of these times, nature was played as the devil's playground, whereas society was played as, God's land or whichever. Mm-hmm. Not to get too much into it, because I'm actually going to talk about it a lot more when I review Saint Maud, shortly after this podcast. but we were raised very conservatively Christian in a particular sect, which I'm not going to mention by name unless you want to.
It's okay, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, so we were raised...
Too personal, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to talk about it in St. Maud, but for here, yeah, so...
That's why this movie really affects us in that way.
Yeah, because you kind of see the extremism that we were raised with. Like, our mom wasn't very... Our parents weren't extremists, but we had a lot of extremist people in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
I dropped my fucking phone. So we saw a lot of this kind of everything is the devil kind of behavior where, you know, all of these sort of things. And that this movie does a lot of talking about that. Specifically, the whole idea of, like, the wild and sexuality and, like, the alternative lifestyle and how that's evil and bad.
And how they're evildoers.
Yeah, just because they say so.
Yeah.
And that's basically the preface. We're not Christians now. PlaidPagan is not just a clever name. I am a pagan. So it just fits.
Same with Moon Witch. Like, I legit think I'm a witch.
Yeah.
I feel like I am. Like,
yeah. So like she's Wiccan. I'm more eclectic pagan,
Yeah.
specifically druidry and Wiccan. But yeah, so it's not just a name. So for us, like, this movie kind of resonates on a different level because we can kind of relate to both aspects of it. The religious oppression of Christianity being the dominant religion in the world, which it is still to this day.
And, sorry, I don't mean to
No.
cut you off, but something, like, I know we're being a little personal, right? But something about this movie that really ties in with our upbringing, our family, is the extreme of how the insanity of the religious mind can turn a family against each other.
Yes. And yeah, and we've seen that in our own family as well.
Yeah.
Family members that don't speak to us anymore. Not in our immediate family, but like extended family, because of our religious decisions. So yeah, we've definitely seen that extremism within our own life, as well as just blanket statement of any religion other than Christianity is bad.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you are a pagan, you're a straight up devil worshiper, which isn't true. Like, no pagans worship the devil. Like, this film kind of projects this image, and there's a reason for that. I'm going to get into that about, like, paganism being satanic,
But that's
which isn't true.
That's if you believe that Satan and Satanism is evil or bad.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to perspective,
Right, yeah.
because even from my own, I mean, what did Satan do in the Bible that was so bad anyway? I'm very well biblically versed as well, so
I like to pretend I'm not.
yeah, so like, come at me with anything there. But biblically speaking, Satan never did anything wrong. Like, his advocation was pretty much speak for yourself, or think for yourself.
Free will. Free
will.
mind.
God says that.
So he'll Satan.
But yeah, like, God says that, but then his actions dictate otherwise. It's not really free will when you have to listen to everything. You have to do everything his way, right?
Yeah.
Whereas,
it's servitude. It's eternity, like of servitude, literally. Yeah.
And Satan's whole stick was break free from that. Like, you don't need to be bound in chains because this guy says you need to be.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's another. Depends on how you view that particular element. Now, this movie, for me, is a story that Christians, specifically Puritan Christians, would tell their kids to scare them into remaining Christian. And it's also got a liberation of self into a alternative lifestyle storyline as well. So there's two main storylines. And there's a lot of... I've seen a lot of people say various things about this movie, about what it means as a folklore story, what it means as like a coming of age story, and many other. I've seen quite a few, like the whole thing about like the devil grooming her so that she'll murder her family, that she turns evil. I've seen all kinds of arguments, but personally for me, it's specifically a story that you would tell, like, that, you know, you would tell your kids. You know, if you don't follow the Bible exactly like this, you'll be banished from society. You'll have to force to live off the land. And you know what's out in there on the land? Witches.
Yeah, and his minion of evil witches.
Yeah, the devil's out there, and he's going to get you and rape your babies and or whatever.
And that's one of the things too. A lot of these folk tales, especially from this era, a lot of these unfounded fears of the church were literally just their own fears of what they didn't understand, what they didn't know, what they didn't accept into their society because they viewed it wrong or evil for whatever subjective reason. And I think that's pretty evident in the film, like how the family itself is cast out from the community because the father, I think, from what I understood, he had a bit of religious differences with the community, and they were just so ill-accepting of him and cast his whole family.
Yeah, it's played off as his pride, right?
Yeah.
His pride.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what, I think it was like the way he prayed or something was incorrect, or like he viewed a certain
But that's
verse.
how intolerant these religious zealots are, right?
Yeah, the Puritans, right? The Puritans
Puritanism,
they had no, and we still see that today with certain evangelical groups and extremism.
Absolutely,
today.
it's still very relevant today. Although Eggers keeps the film in a very 17th century era, we never feel modern in it at all, which I love.
That's true.
Right? Even though there's still modern correlations, right? But there's never any bouncing back and forth of like, hey, like, am I still watching a 17th century film, right? So
we do see some direct like the roots of what is now the evangelical movement today, right?
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Because I think out of all the Christian sects, evangelicals and like the cult ones are the ones I have the most problem with. Like Catholics and like the more orthodox ones don't bother me as much as like because they over the years, like specifically with like Anglicans, they become way more, I mean, they're still not as accepting as they should be, but like they become way more open-minded to a lot of things, whereas the evangelicals are the ones that have been so outspoken and so negative about a lot of things. And I find that they're the ones that misquote scripture, misuse scripture for their own agenda way more than the other ones do, the other sects. I mean, they all do it, but like I find that like that specifically evangelicals are far worse, and you can see the roots of that in this movie.
Yeah. Specifically, like I said, with the father in the beginning, the reason why the family's banished, and then with Thomasin, who Thomasin does her kind of, I suppose, a daughterly service of religious whatever to her family. She I can't think of the word. But she says her prayers. She says, yes, I love God. Yes, yes, I know my prayers. But she seems to actually struggle with if she actually believes and accepts the religion. Yeah,
it definitely seems like you get the vibe that it's being forced on her, and she does not.
Specifically by the zealot of a mother. Oh my God.
Yeah, and you definitely can see, I think, that Thomasin isn't necessarily as receptive to it. As maybe they would like her to be.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Absolutely.
Not that she's a blatant rebel. It's just that she maybe she does believe in God and prayer, but not in the way that they're forcing her to do it. Yeah. So this whole idea of being indoctrinated and doing it exactly their way, right? And that's kind of,
it's not like she had a choice. You're born and raised into a religious family, like we were, and that's just what we knew and what we were expected to do and practice, right?
And the residual effects of that on your entire life, like you find later in life things that why does this bother me? Oh, because I was told false morals about why this is bad.
Yeah. Or, and we've had a lot of these conversations too about things that still kind of haunt us and torment us because of what we went through our brainwashing into these religious theologies.
Yeah, I mean, our particular group of Christianity is considered a cult. So the fact that we broke out of that period is a miracle, but because that shit will affect you for life.
Yeah.
And a lot of other people that I've spoken to have the same, that have experienced that. But anyway.
So what do you want to talk about first with the movie?
Oh, God.
So maybe like I can just kind of talk with some of the cinematography, I think.
Yeah, because I feel like I've been rambling on quite a bit, so yeah.
No, it's okay.
I want some of your...
I mean, remember when we talked about I'm the pretty thing that lives in this house? I ramble on like 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. Now it's your turn. No, so I think this film, like I said, it's a folktale. and it's in an era, 17th century, a colonial New England, and Robert Eggers puts us in that mindset. Like I'm reiterating what I said. We never feel like we're not there, because the dialogue and the beautiful costumes and the accents. And I love the movie. Like I said, it's an atmospheric horror. I love how it's very bleak and everything's very gloomy. It really feels like you're in New England,
The movie, again, like you brought up Pretty Thing, like when we were talking in that episode about like how the film feels oppressive, specifically with Black Coat's daughter. This is the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
The movie feels oppressive, like,
and it feels claustrophobic because
even though they're out in the wild, it still feels
Yeah, and so they're isolated in this kind of like very small little cabin with their very small rotting land that their farming is failing, and they're right beside spooky woods. But the whole spooky woods. Yeah. I'm like, I'm one of those witches in the woods. But the whole movie, I like how the paranoia and the suspicion just continues to escalate and to grow and to grow, and the religious hysteria just really takes the center stage and starts to turn the family members against each other, specifically the mother, who is the zealot of the household.
Thomason.
Yeah, and blaming her for everything. And she's a young woman coming of age. And even in the end, she's accusing Thomason, calling her a whore and all that, because that's why, like, I kind of viewed it as a bit of a coming of age story, but like a woman trying to also, like, to liberate herself as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like, like I said before, like breaking the chains of oppression kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I've watched this movie several times, and I'm pretty sure the only one that Thomason directly kills is the mother.
That's the only one we see. I don't.
Because it's implied that the witch eats the two kids, and then Black Phillip kills the dad, and then the baby is kidnapped at the beginning.
Yeah. Okay.
So Thomason
I forgot about the twins. Yeah.
Yeah, the only one, and then the brother dies from his illness.
Well, he's cursed by the witch in the woods.
Yeah.
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 And so the illness does kill him.
Yeah, he's basically got pneumonia when he comes back.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which leads me to which brings up the point of this movie and nudity, because nudity in this movie is put in a specific context of the mindset of the era. Nudity is a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
The fully clothed people, they've got the right up to the necks, and like they got all their garb,
to the wrist, to the ankle,
and then you see the exact opposite, and the nakedness is the wild and free spirit, right? Because even the brother comes back naked. The witches all practice naked. Thomason eventually ends up naked herself. There's this symbolism of
and
nudity.
it's the devil that tells her to get naked.
Yeah. There's a symbolism of nudity being the wild, and and it's implied that it's bad, right? Which comes back down to like that Puritan lifestyle of not being able to express sexuality. They always seem so fucking repressed with like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one of the things too, I think, specifically with the Puritanism, the religious patriarchal views of women's sexuality and of women's nudity is always viewed as evil and sinful and wrong. Yeah. Right? And I think,
the devil's work and all this stuff.
And I think that's why specifically for me, I felt like Thomason was liberated by the devil in the end. And I think that's why she decided, hey, I can go nude and I can join the nude witches because I can embrace my womanhood. I can embrace my own sexuality and not be ashamed.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I agree. Yeah, it is again, like I said, there's two specific stories. A story that is to scare the shit out of Christian children, Puritan Christian children, and the second story is the liberation, like her ability to break free from the constraints of the society and religion that she's been raised in, specifically.
And kind of to go off of that, like the idea of is it a film that's about theological paranoia that just eventually turns a family against each other, a family that not only distrust each other but distrust themselves and starts to fear themselves and each other? Or is it a film about the unfounded fears of the church actually being founded, right? And that's where Eggers specifically, he takes those folk tales and those facts of the era and make it real.
Yeah, and like that's what I mean. There's so much.
He brings that horror to us. He makes it real.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that's the thing about this movie is that there's so many intertwining storylines, and like when I say intertwining, I mean like it's not like they're interconnected like Game of Thrones or something. What I mean is like they could mean so many things, and there's all these deep religious metaphors and even non-religious metaphors. I feel there's a lot of metaphors about societal norms in general, and like acceptance of certain things that are still to this day an issue. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really horrifying things of this film. And not only does Eggers show us that a lot of these, well, in his perspective and his storytelling, he takes the Puritan worldview and these religious, insane ideologies and make it true in this film.
Yeah.
Right? So that's truly terrifying, and we feel that fear. But then also, like we said, like all the societal norms that are constantly making us feel oppressed. Because if we don't fit in, well, then we're evildoers, or what we're doing is wrong, right?
Yeah.
Which is another really horrifying notion, because then that, like, a lot of times it inflicts self-doubt, and it causes confusion, and it's hard to... I know maybe I'm getting a little personal with this, but then it's hard to accept yourself when you think different than what you're told to think, right?
No, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And like again, yeah, this episode's going to be a more personal, but that's because of the way we were raised and the things we were told as children. A lot of the things I grew up as an adult, I realized just simply weren't true.
Exactly.
And having to confront that.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, this movie does that well. This whole idea of, well, you don't have to live by these particular standards, and it's played off like, in the horror sense, is played off as like the only way she could be liberated was for her whole family to be dead and her to be. That's the extremist viewpoint of it, but like the reality is, in some ways, the family would be dead, like metaphorically speaking, like.
Yeah, and I say, like, you can argue, too, that maybe that ending is extreme, but then a lot of views and practices of the church are very extreme.
Yeah,
it's fitting.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, the whole... in some religious sects, a lot of them, the idea of, like, ostracizing a family member, they are dead to you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So there's a metaphor of that, even, I think. And again, this movie is going to say different things to you depending on where you come from. Some people may just see a movie about a witch in the woods. Some people will see other things, and it depends on where you're coming from. I think, and then that's the part of the power of this film.
Yeah. I agree, definitely.
Yeah.
And like you said, you could take it as like I specifically view it as a film very much about religious hysteria and the oppression or repression. And I know like a lot of people have actually viewed it as a feminist film because of Thomason herself as a character, right? And her character arc and how she's liberated in the end. But she liberates herself in the end, right? So. Yeah,
like I think that there was kind of an argument there that like Lucifer gives her power or Black Phillip gives her power.
But it's what she chooses.
And my counter argument to that is no, he didn't force her to do anything. She made a choice, right? And like,
she did.
And that's the key. It's like it's that whole free will argument, right? Like you can't force him to do anything. They bring that up even in friggin' Devil's Advocate. Like the whole thing, he couldn't get him to breed for sure. Like he had to agree to it, so he just kills himself instead, right? Because he didn't want to do it. So like. Again, like they can't force you, and that's kind of a thing overall with like spirit beings in like the Christian, like the kind of heaven and hell storylines. Like even like the angels and the demons and the good or the bad or however you want to look at it, depending on your perspective. They can't actually directly influence you. They can show you things and say things, and that was always the role that Lucifer played in the Bible.
Yeah. And even, it's kind of funny you say that because the way of guiding your hand or showing you something is the role that Lucifer really embodied. Even when he's telling Thomasin, do you want to sign the book? And she's like, I don't know if I can. He's like, I will guide your hand. And he's showing her how she can do it, how she can liberate herself.
Yeah.
So, like, just because there's a male presence doesn't take away from the feminist narrative. You know what I mean? I think a lot of times people are like, oh, it's only about, like, feminism is only about empowerment. But a lot of times it's about equality. It's about women's choice as well. And
core feminism is about equality.
Yeah.
I think it's lost a lot of that with a lot of, like, I think social media has been kind of the bane of a lot of that sort of stuff. Things that have one meaning become something completely different, and then that word becomes a dirty word, right?
Yeah,
like you say, like a lot of people get triggered by the word feminist because they think it means to like belittle all men and all this kind of stuff, and that's not what it means at all. It means legitimate equality, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I kind of have a question for you about the movie.
Sure.
Specifically with regards to the witch. So do you think that there actually is a witch in the woods that's tormenting this family? Or do you think perhaps it's just the growing paranoia and the suspicion because of the issues they're having within the family unit? Or perhaps you think that Thomasin is actually the witch herself and has brought the torment upon her own family? What do you think?
Yeah, this is one of those topics that comes up a lot, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people feel the latter, that she's doing it. She's the witch to begin with and has been the whole time.
I've heard that a lot too. Take your time.
Yeah, I don't know, because like, I feel there's strong support for both. Like, for me, the middle one, not as much. I have heard that stance, but for me personally, I think it's either like there is a coven of witches and she joins them, or she is the witch herself. Given the title of the film, I think it kind of gives more evidence to the Vivitch.
The Vivitch.
Sorry, I had to
make it sound German.
Well, because you've seen the poster art.
Yeah.
It's like two V's instead of a W,
it's
so
very cool.
the Vivitch. But anyway, I think the title kind of gives it away that she's the witch to begin with. And then she just goes and joins the rest of them afterwards. But I what?
I disagree.
No.
Go on. I'll tell you my thought after.
No, but like, I'm not, my answer
the
isn't...
eye of Sauron watches you.
They make me backpedal now. Because I like I said, there's strong evidence for both. So like,
yeah,
my initial,
I agree.
I don't know, like my initial thought is that like, she joins the coven, but like maybe she already innately had abilities that were just kind of groomed by Black Phillip.
It does kind of seem like Thomasin is susceptible to becoming a witch because of all the kind of horrific graphic imagery we see with her. So for instance, like the chicken fetus and the broken egg, we see the blood in the milk goat.
Yeah.
I think... Oh, and even like she jokes about being the witch in the woods, and when she's talking to one of her younger siblings, one of the twins, the daughter, I think her name's Mercy, she is kind of afraid of her sister because her sister literally tells her like, I'm the witch in the woods, and I just kind of thought that was interesting that Thomasin really even embodies that whole kind of that witch herself. And I don't know, I thought that was a bit of foreshadow, to be honest, to kind of see what Thomasin's final character arc would be. However, I do feel as if Thomasin doesn't become a witch until the very end. I feel that, like I said, I feel that as if she's susceptible to it, as the witch in the woods obviously torments the family. Maybe they're targeting Thomasin because Thomasin seems to be very willful about wanting to break free from the religion, wanting to kind of perhaps liberate her own mind in a sense of breaking even free from her zealot of a mother. But specifically for me, the era of this film and the folk tale in this era says that a witch only becomes a witch after she signs the pact with the devil.
Okay, yeah.
So I think she's not a witch until that moment when Black Phillip says, let me guide your hand to do so. And at that moment, that's when she becomes a witch and she walks off into the woods. However, I do think that she was basically susceptible to it through her willfulness, yeah.
Yeah, see, people say that, like, she was coerced by the devil, but, like, Black Phillip didn't spend time with her.
He didn't come to her first, he went to the twins first.
Yeah, it was the twins that he spent his time with.
Yeah.
So, like, that's my counter-argument to that. Although, I mean, the devil does kill the father, right?
Yeah, but Thomasin seeks out the devil because when her twin siblings say, "Oh, we talked to Black Phillip," and they're constantly singing the song about the king that is Black Phillip. Thomasin, in the end, goes to Black Phillip and actually beckons him to talk to her, and that's when eventually he speaks to her and when the pact is signed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Dost thou wish to live deliciously?
Yes. So let's talk about the actual witch in the woods. Like that really graphic scene.
There's like 10 of them.
Yeah, but
the main one that you're supposed to be projecting from or projecting on the rabbit familiar.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of like jumping a little bit, but the reason why I bring up talking about this witch is because she very specifically, obviously torments this family, but she preys on each of the family members' vulnerabilities.
Yes.
And that kind of goes with the whole theme of the film, like you mentioned before, that with the church and the Puritan view of Puritanism meaning like the fear of God and original sin. And we've kind of mentioned this before when we first saw the film in 2016, I believe it was, about how each of the family members has their own vulnerability, which is probably also in correlation with one of the original sins.
Yeah. Yes. I have seen some breakdowns of that, and like the direct correlation with the father being pride and the mother being anger and the brother being lust and all these kind of things. That's a conversation that that was one of the things that was like, this is interesting. I could talk about it, but like. There is a lot of symbolism and metaphor there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think specifically, like you said, the father would be pride and the mother's wrath. With Thomasin, I always thought that she was very, like, almost gluttonous in a sense for liberation. Like, she was very willful. She beckoned Black Phillip.
With the whole metaphor, the taste of butter.
Yeah, and like pretty dresses and the twins, I don't know, like obviously the twins were very, very impressionable, and Black Phillip came to the twins first because they were so impressionable. But I don't know what original sin they would be.
I don't know either. Like sloth maybe because of like the laziness.
Yeah, you know what? Because Thomasin's always yelling at them to help out and to do work.
Yeah. So sloth maybe. But yeah, I think. The whole thing you were saying about like the witch tormenting the family is an interesting thing because Thomasin doesn't get tormented by her, like directly.
You're right, but she is the victim of all like the horrific.
Yeah, but I think that's so when people say, "Oh, Black Phillip was the one that conditioned her," I was like, I think like no, the witch conditioned Thomasin to join the
That's a good point. Yeah, and that makes sense because if Thomasin's not being tormented, and obviously each of the other family members are, specifically the mother goes after Thomasin and blames her for everything because Thomasin seemingly isn't being tormented by the witch, right? Yeah. So that's a really good point.
You touched it briefly there, but then I kind of derailed you by accident. It happens. This is when we do a shoot from the hip podcast. I
try to keep a bit of notes, but like I still go over the place.
Yeah, same. I tend to ramble or repeat myself, but whatever. None of you have complained about that so far. So, but when you were talking about the really graphic scene, and it was kind of horrifying for me the first time I saw the film. But I'm like, holy fuck, they actually did that. They just grind a baby up.
Yeah. And there's like the naked witch in the background.
And she's like smearing it on her like saggy ass and tits. She's like, shit. And just like, okay, this movie's doing that right away.
It was right away. Yeah.
And then like, we don't really see much else violently for a while. It gets quiet and the movie stays pretty quiet.
Yeah.
As it shows this trauma of the death of the child, how it affects and kind of basically dissembles the whole family and their like illusion of their security.
Yeah. Okay, so absolutely. We see that like really graphic open scene with the baby being killed. Well, wait, like it's implied, and then there's a bunch of guts being churned,
Yeah.
like butter.
Yeah, you don't actually see the child get murdered.
But after that, like you said, just to kind of piggyback off what you said, the movie kind of slows down, and what we start to really see is a lot of that paranoia and fear start to rise. That eventually,
the finger pointing.
yeah, and it tears the family apart. But as we see that suspicion and that paranoia really rise, we see that intermittent mixing of supernatural elements, and that's a lot of what Thomason experiences, some of the images I've already mentioned. So I think that was kind of a neat way to kind of like start off super scary, and there's a lot of like really cool music and sound mixing, and then it just kind of dips and it just kind of stays like this, like this, like this, and then boom again in the end, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was I like that quite a bit.
Yeah, Eggers is excellent with his style of pacing. I again, like The Lighthouse is another one of my is way up there for me, as pretentious as it is. But it's the same kind of thing.
I like The Lighthouse.
I actually compare this movie more to Midsummer than I do The Lighthouse. A lot of people would make direct comparisons, and there are some, like the whole forbidden knowledge thing that like they both end with like the scene of light and them both like losing their mind about the fire for Thomason and the lighthouse, the light from the lighthouse for Robert Pattinson's character. I can't remember his name.
No, I can't either.
Yeah, so I compare it more to Midsummer than The Lighthouse, because much like, and I would love to talk about Midsummer as well, because the true horror of Midsummer is that you get indoctrinated into the cult yourself. Because most people watch that movie and feel justified that they burn her boyfriend alive. They're like, yeah, fuck him.
Well, because
right?
he like cheats on her.
But I have a whole,
Cheats.
yeah, I was gonna say, he's raped.
The bunny ears,
Yeah,
Bruce.
yeah, he's raped. But anyway, that's a whole other thing that I can
He's
get.
completely seduced,
Yeah.
and he's bewitched
He's
by...
drugged.
Oh, we're getting off topic!
Yeah.
We're getting
Get off track. Yeah, like I said, I could talk about. That's another one I could spend like a good hour on, because I love that film as well. But the reason I compare the two is that the horror is more in Midsummer is that you get indoctrinated into the cult and you don't even realize it, right? And I think The Witch does the same thing, but with the religious extremism. Like you immediately jump to these conclusions and you start making like. It makes you think the way that they do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the horror, because you're like, I'm turning into a zealot over this. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, that's what I said. Like, when I say, like, Eggers really puts us in that mindset.
Yeah.
And he really makes us believe that these folk tales and these fears are true. That these unfounded fears of the church are true.
Yeah.
And it puts us in that mindset. It is absolutely terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Because sometimes, even though... Sorry, I just cut you off.
No.
But sometimes you like, and rightfully so, I think, as an audience member, you want to blame the mother, who's a religious zealot, and she's brooding, and she's so angry, and she takes it out on her daughter. Or you might want to blame the prideful father, who can't farm, he can't hunt, he can't trap, and he can't, I guess, provide for his family. So he, in a sense, is failing his family. He's not necessarily like the head of the household, because he can't fulfill that role as a man, right, in this kind of era.
And and these are like these are like the Christian roles that they put on you,
Exactly.
right?
And one of the things I do like about this film, too, just a quick little nugget of information, is the one feminist narrative that I did take from this as well, is that this movie really deconstructs that kind of religious, societal, family construct, where the mother is really more the figurehead of the family, not the father.
Yes.
And Thomason backmouths her father in the end. Not that I'm saying she's wrong, but she stands up to him and she says, hey, you let me take the blame for all these things. You didn't stand up for me. You let mother come at me. And when is a daughter ever allowed to speak to her father like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I would say there is a strong feminist narrative as well. But,
Yeah, 100%.
yeah.
I out of the family members, I think the one that I have the biggest problem with is the mother.
Yes.
And I actually feel like the father doesn't quite deserve it like he gets it. Like I feel like he's prideful, but like
he's undeserving of his punishment.
Yeah, I feel like the only one who really deserves it is the mom. Like,
yeah,
I think even like the kids, like they're just kids. Like
the lustful kid who's obviously going through hormonal changes. Being lustful is not, I don't think, it's a sin.
No.
And like, he looks at his sister's cleavage, and
but that's all the one. That's the only like. I'm not suggest whatever. Again, that comes down to like anything anyway. Half of these fucking cults marry their own sisters anyway.
Well, I'm just saying, like because the witch became seductive in the forest to lure him because based on his lust, but I wouldn't say that he deserved to die because of that.
Yeah, he's
sin,
11?
You know?
Yeah,
and that's kind of one thing that's very interesting about what Eggers does with this story is that even though we can, like as an audience, we watch each family member, maybe the faults that they do and their vulnerabilities and their original sin, but Eggers never puts the blame on any character. He lets each character speak for themselves. He lets them do their own actions and follow their own story. And that really helps the story itself, the film, to remain neutral. We may want to blame the crazy mother or the father that can't provide for the family, or maybe we might want to blame Thomasin as being a witch that tortures or torments her family. But Eggers never does that. He never puts the blame on any of his characters. And I thought that was really, really remarkable. Because when I first watched The Witch, I was waiting. I'm like, okay, who's to blame? None of them were.
Yeah, and even down to Thomasin, like you kind of can just, like you can kind of make I mean, I can definitely make an argument about her not doing anything wrong.
Same.
Like her mother attacks her and tries to kill her. Like,
her mother is killing her.
Yeah, like so she defends herself.
Yeah.
Like, if someone's trying to kill me, I'm not going to sit there and just die.
Yeah, I think, and that's why in the end,
so like, she defends it. She's not bad.
And that's why, like I was saying, in the end, when she's flying above the fire, she's crying and she's laughing. She's laughing a lot of times, like when we're super angry or when something creates. Sometimes we try to find comedic relief to release some of the anger to help us.
It's a stress response too.
Yeah, to help us cope with it. But she was also crying because she literally just lost her entire family and
everything she knows.
And that's not the outcome that everyone would want. Like, let's face it, right?
Yeah.
So she.
Yeah, despite the fact that she's like liberated, like I was saying, she's not necessarily that she wanted her whole fucking family to die, to be liberated. It's maybe more like open their eyes instead of this bullshit lifestyle that they're leading. It's so rigid and uptight.
And that's the horrible thing about the Puritan lifestyle.
And that's what I mean. Like that's where the real horror is. Like is you see this. I worded it incorrectly before. What I meant was like you see the idea of this lifestyle and what it does to a family, and like the inability. They're all dead to her because if it was the other way around, like if they had all lived, and she still chose to take this alternative religious path, she would have been dead. Like it would have been her that was dead to the family. She would have
been shunned or banished from the family.
Yeah, she would have become a pariah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a kind of a metaphor in a way that exact kind of behavior, because that happens today. Like we were just saying.
Yeah. To kind of switch gears quickly before we sign off. The one really remarkable thing about the cinematography in this film is I love that Eggers used all natural lighting.
Yes.
How beautiful was that?
This is a gorgeous film.
So, and not just like the scenery as well, like obviously like holy shit, it's amazingly beautiful. I would like to be fucking banished there.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said. Like they make that seem like such a bad thing, dude. That's my fucking dream.
I know, right?
I want
to be a witch in the woods.
Live in a fucking a farm out by the wood's edge, by a river and everything, out of societal bullshit and like what people tell you should be doing with your life. Fuck you. I want to do shit my own way, man.
Yeah.
I'd love to be. I mean, I'm a fucking. If I could be full blown, I'd be one of those fucking no shoes out in the woods hippies. Like
I would be naked every day wandering in the woods if I wouldn't be like shot, like handcuffed and taken to an insane asylum.
And like this is what I mean. Like, gonna get me on a political rant, but like just society today. It's like everything dictates how you need to live your life. Everything. Our politics, our religion, our laws, our government, everything tells you this is how you have to live your life. This is what's right. This is what's right. And then when you don't fit into their little box, which a lot of us don't, I would argue you receive backlash. You know, you treat like a pariah, whatever.
Yeah, and I would argue that those were a lot of sentiments felt by Thomason.
Yes, that's what I mean. That's why that's the direct correlation to my point.
Sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
I was just kind of like making that point for you.
No, it's all good.
But like the scene that really hit it for me, that made me realize that Thomason was not impressed with her father's decision to be banished on his own pride, where it's like she when they said leave, like the community said leave, she kind of stood there for a moment like shocked, like she didn't want to leave. She was the last one to leave after her family left. And to me, it's almost like she would have wanted her father to just say whatever they wanted to hear so that they wouldn't be banished. And that's where, like, right away the seeds of doubt were sown for me. I'm like, she doesn't really truly believe what's being preached to her. So anyways,
yeah, like I think the whole idea of the religious turmoil is like is the root of the whole film. It opens with that and it carries through the whole film. This whole inner turmoil of like religious doubt and then religious extremism.
Yep. Yeah. And then just in the end, whom do you serve? Satan.
Hail Satan! No, like, just, yeah. I mean, I have so much more I could say about this film, but, like, I don't want it to be 3 hours long. I'm repeating myself at this point, but there's just so many things, like the Black Phillip being, like, the ultimate symbol of the wild free spirit is the one that kills the father, who's the one that brings them out to the wilderness to begin with, the one who, like, it's like, he rejects the societal norm, and then nature conquers him. So
that's a good point.
It's kind of an interesting. Like I said, there's all kinds of little tidbits like that to this whole film, and there's so many things I could talk about, but those are the main things I wanted to talk about. Specifically, like the religious extremism and like how society views things, and because I feel like a lot of that is still prevalent to today. And you still see a lot of that. Like, the dominant religions are ultra-conservative religions. And I'm not bashing. If you're conservative, fine, whatever. That's your personal choice. I don't really give a shit. Politics, to me, is a game. They're all working for the same fucking people. Doesn't matter. Left wing, right wing, all they're doing is causing us all to fight. But the truth of the matter is that strong conservative religions run the world. All the laws that we have, all the things that are in place are all rooted in religious viewpoints, and that are conservative. Christianity. I mean, the three biggest religions in the world was it's Christianity, Islam, and I don't know what else. Christianity and Islam are the two biggest, and then everyone else is like underneath that. There's like half of what they have shared among everywhere else.
They just like take little pieces they like. And
I think ours is the smallest percentage, which is like 5% of the world are pagans. So, anyway.
Well,
I had a lot of shit to say.
Do you want to say anything else quickly?
No. I've rambled on. Hopefully, I didn't come off as a pretentious cunt in this episode. But like.
No, you're always a pretentious cunt.
Yeah, okay. It's nothing new. Don't worry about it.
No, this is more personal for us. But I think there was a lot to say, and I think that was fine. That's okay. Anyways.
Yeah, and I hope you guys enjoyed our little intro too. We worked really hard on that, and
it was so much fun.
And we really hope, and we want to do that moving forward for most of our episodes. Actually, all of our episodes, we want to have this kind of little skit that we do.
Trying to make it more fun.
Yeah, themed on the episode. And
changing the sets. And
and then that way when we release the, it's like a teaser essentially. Like we'll release it, and then you can kind of guess what the film is we're going to be covering. Based on the scenes that we chose. Yeah, so we chose specific scenes, and and maybe we'll do like tributes or whatever. It depends on whatever we feel creatively doing for each episode, and kind of give you a little sneak peek of what we're going to do a few weeks later. There is some changes that we're doing, so we're trying to ramp up the quality, so we won't be doing them as often now. We thought we could do it, but it turned out to be a lot more work, and I've had a lot of technical issues, as you saw with the clown episode. I was so disappointed with that, with the issues I ended up having with that episode. So I'm trying to avoid that kind of shit in the future. So I think maybe slowing it down and doing a bigger production will be better overall. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to say at the end?
No, I'm good. We can wrap it up.
You want to shout out to Adam?
Oh, my best buddy Adam?
Yeah.
Adam, I love you, man. You're the best. And thank you for making our shirts.
These awesome shirts that he made us. Thanks, dude. They're sick.
Man.
Love them.
We're showing you our breasts.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you can even see mine because my
Well, it
mic's
says
right here.
PlaidPagan and Moonwitch Guadcast.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. You're the best. Okay, guys, thanks
That's
for tuning in again, and thank you for being patient with us and,
Yeah.
and being so loyal and supportive.
Yeah,
Okay.
we appreciate it. Okay, be safe, be good to each other, and we'll see you next time. Stay sick, fuckers. There's so much, so many stories and so many metaphors and symbols that are.
Sorry. Yeah, we have to redo that. Well, that's probably the easiest cut we've ever had to do.
Yeah, no joke, man.
It's because, like, we're praising Satan right now, and he's like, yeah, buddy.
Just guiding our hand.
Alright. Oh, fuck me.
Where was I? I had this.
Oh, thank you, kind sir. Okay. Let me get my comfiness here. Got my eyeball.
I like. I'm pretty sure Precious is in the shot. At least, she's right here.
Yeah, you can see her.
Can you see my puppy?
You can see the little gargoyle.
My old lady. And we'll do a quick wrap up and call it a day.
Yep. This is probably a little bit. Oh, fuck me. Ah, no, not the mic. Not the mic.
I actually don't think it's going to be that long of an episode.
Oh, no.
Fuck.
How much did we lose? She's like, Auntie, are you okay? She's like, Auntie, I'm
Poor
here.
Doofy, we're acting.
You ruined my Oscar moment. I'm okay, baby. I'm okay. Are you okay?
These are going in the book.
These are real tears, Mr. Wolf.
Who's the bad actor now?